Leon Spindon the third, welcome to the ATV MX Race Report. Hey man, Decker's training facility had round two of the ATV MX with the first Triple Crown that I've ever heard about in our industry or in the ATVs. It's probably not, but I've never seen it before. Um, what was it like?
It was definitely interesting, and I think, I mean, at least as far as the ATV National Series go, it is the first Triple Crown event. And obviously you and I talked on the pre-race and talked about how it could be, and how excited we were. And I don't think it definitely lived up to its expectations. It made things a little bit more interesting, on both the spectator end and on a team and crew end, because it's just more work to do. But yeah, it was really cool to see, really cool to witness and be a part of.
Well, let me ask you that before we get into the racers and all that other stuff.
Hmm.
How do you keep your beard so straight and nice? Mine's ragged and all over the place. Dude, you're always well groomed. What's up?
I try. I mean, it just I guess we'll just blame it on my genes.
Whatever, dude. I'm jealous. I want a big old full beard, and this is about all I get. All
Well,
squiggly.
hey, Leonard, just to make things equal, I couldn't even get this until I was like 22, and even when it did start coming in, it was no mustache, just Amish like beard.
Dude, I'm damn near 60. Uh, I don't want to.
You've
I
seen
don't
my
want to wait
dad
till I
though.
get a beard when I'm
He's
in.
got a big ass beard too.
Oh, dude, it breaks my heart, but that's okay. Um, from the mechanics side of the event, you made a comment in your intro that there was more work. Describe that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you have the motos were all shorter, but you had one more moto in the day. And with that, and also with being, I'm a rookie pro mechanic, I suppose, but you don't have, your one or two motos and most of the day in between, or all day in between. We had a qualifier with an hour before, in between that and the second qualifier. And you had very limited time in between each event to get the bike prepped and everything like that. And for myself, anyways, we had a transmission failure happen in the second qualifier.
Oh,
So,
didn't change a motor?
yeah, we had to change a motor before we got on the line for the first moto.
And how much time?
We had it was 2 hours for that one, but had to change the motor and then re-prep the rest of the bike as well. And I'm sure it may have been a while, but I'm sure you remember what it's like changing a hot, fresh off the track engine.
Not fun.
It is terrible. It's terrible.
But you know what? I'm a knucklehead and I don't wear gloves. And I work on doing all these service jobs for the other shop. And
Yeah.
usually I do the oil changes and things like
Hmm.
that. Work on them. If there's something wrong with them, I'm constantly burning my hands because I don't
Yeah. Yeah.
awesome.
I hear you. I hear
I mean, I'd be grabbing the hot parts anyways.
you. Right. Yeah. No, I ended up I just threw a towel over the engine, ripped that thing out of there. We threw the fresh one in, and obviously once you get the new one in, it was a lot better because everything was nice and cold. But then that was a brand new engine that I threw in, so I had to do some heat cycles and quick run it up and down a road in Mexico, so it was all ready to go. But we made it happen.
Wow. So you really earned your P's and Q's there, huh?
I would think so. Yes.
Man. Uh, were the conditions hard on the riders, you think?
I don't think that the conditions were that hard on the riders that so much. The big thing was that it was, and we talked about this in the pre-race report, was it's a very long, wide open, fast track. And I don't know. I think some riders just went ahead and changed stuff without really knowing. With Jaden, anyways, we just shoved him out there on the same gearing we ran at Daytona. But I think I shouldn't say I think I know most of the riders had to do some re-gearing between the first qualifier and the second qualifier because everything we usually run did not have enough speed for what was needed at that track.
So you had to give them a taller gear.
Yep, yep.
You just changing a smaller rear sprocket, or did you guys go
That's
with a
what I
bigger?
did. I know there were some people that were changing both, and I mean, I'll be honest with you, I was prepared to run the gearing that I run on the freestyle quads, which is a 1536, just to get you down in the gears a little bit more. But going from a 1540 to a 1536 is such a big change that I didn't want to mess with shift points and that too much.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And you have a rookie,
Right.
whose confidence can get shaken pretty easily.
Exactly, exactly.
I'm sure
But
that training didn't help him.
oh yeah, exactly, exactly. But no, I mean it's the whole shot was wide open, so if you and there was no normally when you go to some of these tracks, if you go on the outside, you have a disadvantage, and if you actually go too far inside, it's a disadvantage too. Whereas at that track, you could be the most inside gate and be perfectly fine. So as you went out, you had less and less of an advantage. And I mean, honestly, if you were outside on the right side of the doghouse at all, you weren't getting a good start.
Really.
Yeah. So
But
you,
that happens, you
Mhm.
know. I mean, that's
Right.
part of it.
Right, exactly. And I mean, so qualifying was even more important than you would think, because you think, all right, you get a kind of bad gate pick, well, you can salvage it. But with how wide open and fast that track was, a lot of passes were either from riders fading or rider mistakes as a whole.
Really.
There's some passes that were forced, and obviously we know rubbing is racing. But there's a few passes where a rider would just find a small advantage to open a window up for themselves and make a move. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the passes were due to mistakes. I mean, in the third moto, for example, Chad Wienen had a mistake right away and set him way back.
And he couldn't even, as fast as he is, he couldn't recover.
Exactly, exactly. And
Was
I
that
think a big thing on that was the short motos.
okay? Or was it the speed?
Well, I think it was a mixture of both. Because there wasn't really a slow rider out there for the most part. Every rider seemed to be very fast out there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, I didn't think that there were anybody slow. I
Hmm.
want to go a little different here than we normally. We usually talk about the front runner guys. I
Yep.
want to go back here in the pack a little bit and ask you some questions, because some of my eye on some of the guys that I like to watch
Hmm.
are deep in the field here, and I'm just wondering, was the track just not to their liking? Was something
Hmm.
going on? You got Westley Wolfe, Janusa, and Rastrelli, back in the 10th, 11th, and 12th spot. And
Hmm.
what happened? These are guys that should normally be, in my opinion, all three of those guys should be fighting for that second place
Hmm.
spot.
Right, right. Well, one thing, and not to sound like I'm trying to make excuses for anyone, but you said those three names, Wesley Wolfe, Nick Janusa, and Jeffrey Rastrelli, and then a few other names that were towards the back of the pack. The big thing that I can tell you right off the bat is those names were all riders who have not ridden that track during the off season. Decker Training Facility is known to be a ATV training center in Florida, and most of the riders that we see in the pro class were either training there all year, all winter long, or train there for a little while in the off season. And I don't believe Wesley ever went there. No, Wesley may have been there once or twice, but Nick and Jeffrey did not go there.
So is there are the conditions that big of a difference that causes these guys not to be able to perform at the highest level or the level that they're normally used to?
I think the big thing with that is just the knowing the track. You know, you had a little bit of an advantage of a lot of the riders knowing every square inch of that track.
But it was different than it is normally.
It was mainly just a couple corners. It was just lines changed up in corners.
Okay.
Otherwise, the track was pretty much the same that it's been.
Okay. So Joel had a clear cut advantage because he spends a lot of time there.
I bet you Joel could have told you more about that track than anyone else.
Okay.
And I mean that's a big thing with Joel too, that
Joel has that
he's
advantage over everybody everywhere.
that I mean Joel's got that advantage over everyone I think at any track is that he really analyzes and he just know like it doesn't matter what track it is, it seems like he knows that track like the back of his hand. And he develops that really quick. And
Yeah.
we've seen that in the past with Chad too. You know, you would see Chad in qualifying just kind of cruising around analyzing the track, and you'll see him do a few laps, but it never like quite clicks. It's not until towards the end of qualifying that you see Chad really throwing a heater and all of a sudden just would usually throw down a ridiculously fast lap.
Right. Did you, not to take the conversation off of the guys
Mhm.
that we're talking about, did you see Chad adapt to the facility like the old Chad?
I don't I don't think it was quite the old Chad. Um, you know, Chad has always been, at least for the last however many years, he's been a very relaxed rider to begin with. Um, but you know, I think with him coming back from this injury and being a little more fresh on the I mean, obviously he's been riding for quite a while, but in a competition scenario, he's kind of fresh at it again. So I believe he's still kind of picking up his marbles from where he left off technically at the end of 23. I mean, he didn't even get a full event in 2024.
Right.
And also the fact that it could be a little bit, and I don't want to think this way, but it could be a little bit mental with Chad because he is getting older. He's had two major back injuries now. Maybe that is messing with him a little bit.
Well, I don't want to forecast what's going through his head. When
Right.
I talked to him on the, last week's show,
Mhm.
he seemed ready to go and really
Mhm.
focused. And you never want to second guess the eight-time champion.
Right, right. And honestly, personally, I really hope he does come back a little harder, especially this next round in Georgia. I hope he comes on a little stronger, a little faster, and I'd like to see him competing a little bit more on the front of the pack.
I would too. I really would too.
Hmm.
Um, as we move up the ladder and we start talking about some of the guys, I don't want to ignore, Adam Ulrich and Marshall Smith and Joseph Chambers and Launderville at all.
Hmm.
These guys probably rode their asses off and
Hmm.
and and tried as hard as they could. You know,
Hmm.
Jaden probably was a little off because of that transmission, and
Hmm.
maybe that's just not his forte with that facility. Who knows?
Hmm.
Chambers, I expected more out of him though. He's a
Right,
Florida guy.
right, right. Yeah. And I mean, this isn't his first year of pro either. You know,
Right. I mean, no comments there, huh?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't say what, you know, Joseph Chambers, he keeps to himself for the most part. He's not a very vocal, very social person. So it's hard to say what's actually going on behind the scenes there. You know, whether it was, he just couldn't get comfortable, whether he was dealing with, you know, some sort of bike issue or bike setup that he was fighting. It's hard to say.
Right. Well, maybe he'll come forward and talk with us
Hmm.
and let us know.
Right.
Um, your guys right in front of the Wolf and Janusa, the ninth, eighth, seventh spots was Jackson, Norris, and Sar.
Hmm.
I kind of expected a little bit more out of Sar, means that he does some of the beach races in overseas,
Hmm.
in the sand races over there. I kind of figured he would adapt better. I know that he has ridden at the facility there.
Yeah.
I expected a little bit more out of him as well, but it is what it is. The
Hmm.
Really the surprises in this deal are Jackson and Norris.
Hmm.
Jackson coming off of that fifth place last year in the points, and then he just pops in there. He's running strong. He's got himself in his seventh because none of the guys in front of him are slouches by any
Right.
means.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah, and I mean Norris actually surprised me quite a bit. I mean, he's had two events in a row now that he's done pretty well at.
Right.
You know, he got a good start and did really well at Daytona, and here at the Decker training facility, he again got two decent starts. You know, they weren't phenomenal or anything, but he got two decent starts with that put him towards the middle of the pack. And I mean, it's not like he settled. He looked like he was kind of battling quite a bit throughout those motos. You
Right.
know, Mason had he had a bad start in, I believe it was the first moto. Um had some issues. He had kind of had a little get off on the well, and he had a get off in Daytona as well. But I didn't see it, so I didn't quite see if it was a get off or if he just stuffed it over berm. Obviously, it's a sand track. You go over a berm, you're not just going over the berm, you're getting stuck on top and you're done for a little while.
Right.
And it claimed a few riders really. So I'm not sure which one of those happened to Mason, but he came back and I mean he found his way back up and passed quite a few riders on that his way to his finishes.
Well, yeah, he's got that 113. He's 1 point behind Chad. He's
Right, right,
13-6 fourth, and Chad is 13-6 third.
right,
So,
right. So yeah, it was that first moto that he had issues, and like I said, he crawled, but he climbed his way back up pretty well.
right. Hey, that, you know what? And when I got to talk to Mason, I was kind of impressed.
Hmm.
He's a little tiger.
He's a tiny dude.
Yeah, but he's ferocious. I think
Yes, he
give
is.
the guys some seasoning, let him go out there and fight with those guys a little bit,
Hmm.
and look out. He's gonna leave his mark.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think, you know, obviously, like you said, he finished fifth last year. His rookie season went phenomenally. And if he can, I think obviously there's a lot of racing left. So he can easily do well again this year, but the kid's got a lot of raw talent. And I think if he can just turn some of that talent into a little bit of seasoning and kind of maturing in the sport, I think he's going to have a very well pro career.
I agree with that. I really do. You know, you have some young guys in this field that I think are going to become your new front runners. Uh,
Hmm.
Nothing against the guys that have been there a little while, but
Hmm.
they need to get their shit together.
Right.
They're faster than this, they're better than this, and they just need to take care of it. Nothing against you guys. It's just the way I talk. Sorry if it, harsh or
Can't
aggressive.
be soft in this sport.
I'm always a little more rough than I should be sometimes. But you go to your next group of three riders that we're talking about, your fourth, fifth, and sixth place riders. You got Wienen in sixth place,
Right.
uh, Lindquist in fifth, and Zack Decker in fourth. I'm going to be honest. I kind of figured Zack Decker would have been on the podium.
Hmm.
Nothing against Zack. He's coming back as well. It's been 2 years, but this is his place, his home. Um, I said it before. When Zach got injured the first time,
Hmm.
I really thought Zach was the contender for the number two spot
Hmm.
that year.
Yeah.
Uh, he was fast, he was flying. He seems like the best way to explain it is he's growing up. He's getting more
Hmm.
mature. You listen to some of the things that he says. he is just evolving as a human and as a rider at the same time. Same with Max. I mean, Max, everybody that meets Max thinks he's, you know, 27 years old. No,
Right.
dude's still a baby. He's what? He's not
Right.
21 yet, is he?
Right. I think he's 21. Yeah, I believe.
Just turned.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's a veteran pro. He's not a 2 year or 3 year. He's a
Right.
4 year pro.
Right. I mean, he went pro in 21.
Yeah, it's 25. So
Right.
wow, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's pretty cool.
Hmm.
Chad has got some work to do to get himself focused and back up into
Hmm.
that podium crowd.
Yep.
Uh, Not that he wasn't fast enough to be in the podium crowd, but that 13th really hurt him in his
Oh,
result.
absolutely. And I mean, obviously the sixth place in the first moto didn't help him at all either. Granted, the second moto showed that he can be where he should be. But yeah, I mean the third moto had and I don't know if it was a mistake. And that's the thing with all these tracks is yeah, I'm in the mechanics area now, so that means you get to see hardly any of the track at every single track.
Do you think that you could consider the Decker track a traditional style motocross track?
As far as us going back there again for another
Oh,
race,
just compared to the other tracks that you race on the circuit.
Um, well, I think this one is probably one of the most accommodating tracks for quads because it is a quad focused track. So it's very wide, like Daytona. And obviously, Daytona is such an anomaly, anyways. It's so narrow, there's not crap for passing. Decker's, it was very wide. Like I said, in one corner, there was three lines going through it. So I mean, as far as it being a race track, it is. However, I think with it being so long and so fast and wide open, it came down to, you really had to think about line choice and adapting to the track as it went. Because I think a lot of the passes that were made were more from, the leader, we'll just say in whatever battle it is, the leader kept following the same lines and the person in the chase started looking at new options. Okay, let me take this line. Did I lose any ground? Did I gain any ground? Is it the same? Okay, let's carry on to this next corner. And that's where you started seeing things. Because I saw, Janusa doing a lot of line change ups. I saw Rastrelli doing it as they had to work their way back up in most of the motos, really. But I think if it were to be more of a racing track, would just be slowing it down a little bit, making it so it's a little bit more rider skill to go fast instead of just hold it wide open.
Do you think jumps are going to do that, or carving it into the whoops, or putting some S's in?
Um, I think I would want to see a mixture of all of them, and maybe not so much. I mean, yeah, jumps, maybe even having a wall or two. Just I'd say probably like one wall in there just to really slow them up. But yeah, adding some more corners, and they did add a lot of tighter corner sections too, and most of those tighter corners were split sections.
Were they good split sections though, so you could have equal time through them?
It looked like they were even, yeah, for the most part. I mean, if you had two people that were fully charging, there was no ground made. If you had one rider that was starting to get a little faded, that that rider that took one of the other lanes was probably going to catch up and or pass.
Okay, so
Hmm.
the course was pretty even.
I think so.
What did you think about Jason Decker changing the race day? We touched on it briefly in the pre-race, but
Mm-hmm.
he changed the race day, lost out on his spectator base, lost out on his advertising to run it so that the pros, these guys didn't have to run in the water.
Right, right. Yeah, I think he made the right choice. And not to sound like, oh, well, we can't handle some water, we can't handle some rain. You know, and Joel Hetrick said this in the meeting too. And like I said, Joel Hetrick probably he might know that terrain a little bit better than Jason Decker even. I mean, for how much time he has spent on that track, he said that that track, if it was going to take any more moisture, was not going to hold up.
Well, whether it held up or not, you got to race, which is what's there.
Right, exactly. But then that was the big thing though, is that they knew that if they would have kept the race going for Saturday and the weather they were talking about came on Saturday, I saw a lot of snaps and stuff of it raining. Um, a good chunk of that track was going to flood.
No. Yeah, there would have been some the motor damage, you know.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, wow, what a great facility, what a great race. Let's just jump in here to these top three guys on the podium.
Yeah.
We did it backwards than we normally do.
Yeah, it's good.
We didn't talk much about Max.
We didn't talk about Max too much. And
He
I mean,
seemed like he just had fair results. He didn't have great results, but he
yeah,
didn't have.
exactly. Exactly. And it's hard to say. I mean, it's too early to tell. We had two tracks that were way different than what we run for the rest of the year. So it's hard to tell whether or not Max is going if he's going to pick it up or if he's going to settle for some reason until Georgia. We're going to see in Georgia if he's really going to pick it up or if he is kind of plateauing.
I think he's going to pick it up.
I think so.
He got faster. He got better. His results were better each moto, just like Jackson's were, and a couple
Right.
of the other guys. Their motos were better as the races went on.
Hmm.
Um,
And I don't see a kid that, like we just said, with how young he is, for somebody that went on the podium a few times last year and had no injuries over the offseason, I don't see him going backwards this year.
no, I think we're going to get to see Max Lindquist where he's supposed to be, what
Hmm.
he's in the development that's supposed to be there. He's got an
Hmm.
amazing mentor in
I was going
Chad.
to say, and his mentor's back at the track again.
Yeah, and that makes it even better for him.
Hmm.
Worst thing for him is that his mentor is on the track, but
Right. He's a
still,
competitor now.
well, I mean, yeah, I don't know if it's going to be Chad Wienen or Max Lindquist in that spot at the end of the year, but it very well could be.
Right. Right.
What's great is we have so many of the guys that got injured over the last 2 years are all back.
Exactly. Exactly.
The key group is back. As we roll into the podium, guys, so we could have picked this from the outside, with Hetrick, Ford, and Hoag. It was hard and
Hmm.
easy at the same time.
Right.
Those are safe picks. Those are you can't bet on them because the odds are 1-to-1. And where if you would have picked a Wienen or a Decker or Jackson or a Wolf, somebody like that, you might, if they would have got on there, you'd have made more money.
Right.
Um, Hetrick and Ford kind of knew that it was going to be 1-2.
Right.
Um, I didn't think Hetrick was going to win every moto, but I didn't think he wasn't either.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we just ought to apologize to Joel right up front. Joel, everybody's got a target on you. We're the media and we want to see the races grow. Brother, I have nothing against you in the fact that you're setting records and forging a new path for ATV motocross. I'm all for it. I am excited about it, and scared for us all at the same time because if you keep going like you are, we're never going to see another champion like that ever again.
Right, right. Yeah, and I mean that's just it. Is Joel is just on this. He has been on this other level above everyone else. And every round I'm gonna say that I hope that there's another person that's battling and another person on top of that step because I just want to see it become more interesting.
Right, right. I mean, well, really now from third to frickin' eighth, ninth, it's a battle. I mean, those guys are
Right,
killing each other for
right.
spots. Um, Bryce Ford went 2-2-2
Hmm.
on Joel. I don't know what the intervals were. I did not get to see lap times. I think
Mhm.
one of them was that Joel had a considerable distance.
Yeah, it was a pretty good gap between in lap times, and Joel can run a consistent lap time the entire race.
Right. What they need to do is make him start 30 minutes before everybody else and then start the rest of the field.
It's possible. Yeah, because I'm just looking here now. You are in the first moto at least. Joel's got at least a second most laps.
Wow. That's so if they run 8 laps, that's 8 seconds.
Yeah, I mean second, third, fourth, second, third, and fourth lap. He had 2 seconds on Bryce. He was actually slower than Bryce by a second on the fifth lap, but then it went right back to being 1 to 2 seconds faster after
Probably
that.
probably changed the line, didn't like it.
He could have, yeah, yeah. So,
Brandon is one of those guys that shocks me a little.
mhm,
I believe Brandon Hoag is as fast as Joel Hetrick. I just don't think Brandon can seem to put all the pieces together on
mhm.
race for whatever reason it is.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a big thing is Brandon is you go back to young Joel Hetrick where he was such a spitfire. He's always had a lot of speed. It's just been harnessing it to not break the machine or mess up somewhere or just go out of control. Brandon's got a lot of speed. He just needs to learn how to harness it again and control that speed. And a lot of it, not saying that Brandon isn't focused, but I think a big thing is just staying focused the entire moto and not getting mentally fatigued.
Right. I liked it better when the series were opposite of each other instead of all in the same.
Right.
That it is what it is. But um, Brandon, I don't, as smart as he is, you think he's out thinking himself?
It could be. He could be. Because obviously you had him on your show, and I've had conversations with Brandon. He's a very smart individual.
He's next level, dude.
Yeah,
He really
he's very smart. And when it comes to the nutrition, I mean, obviously he's training a good chunk of riders. He's giving them the nutrition, everything, giving them diets and stuff like that. Is he knows what he's doing to keep a rider in riding shape.
right.
He's a smart guy in other aspects as well. We won't get into that, but Brandon is just a very smart individual. So it could be that he is just tiring himself out mentally. He's losing focus, and that's where, obviously in the previous races where he would find himself in front of Joel, I think that is where Joel would pass and then kind of walk away from it. Is that obviously you and I know that racing is a very good chunk mental game.
I think that Bryce and Brandon could beat Joel.
Hmm.
They're just afraid of Joel still.
It's yeah,
And they don't know they can go that fast for that long.
right, right.
When they get out there, they spasm a little bit, and then Joel just pops back into the lead, and it's
Hmm.
over. I
Right.
mean, um, one of these guys will come out there, beat him, and pass him and beat him, and the rest of the field will, oh, he's beatable. Oh,
Hmm.
that guy beat him. I can beat that guy. Boom, and then
Right.
the whole dynamic changes,
Hmm.
goes into a circle, where Joel will either rise back to the top because he is that guy, which he probably is,
Hmm.
or they will consume him for a little while and keep him in the pack. And they'll rotate through some of the fast guys for a little bit. Um,
Right.
you're probably a season or two away from that.
Yeah, and I hope so. Because I mean, look at how long Chad would battle with Joel. many seasons that those two went back and forth. And you obviously, Joel had this, if he didn't have all of this speed, he had most of this speed back then. But Chad, in his mind, knew that he could keep up with him and he could ride, battle with him and beat him as well.
Right.
And, we had many, many rounds where there was split motos and what, a couple years that it came down to, one year Joel won because Chad had a chain break.
Right.
Otherwise it was going to be splitting hairs to see who actually won.
Well, Joel lost the title with a chain.
Right. Joel lost the title over a cylinder. But
Yeah.
yeah, Joel lost the title over a chain. It was many years of that. And it wasn't that long ago, but I already missed that because it was exciting to watch.
Well, we're at a different time in the racing, and I think that we have to go through this for
Hmm.
Joel
Hmm.
because, you know, he's teaching them to be next level.
Right.
And every time they level up, he teaches them there's another level. And
Exactly. Exactly.
um, maybe there's just something in Joel that put him far and above
Hmm.
everybody. Maybe mentally or physically, he's got something that they don't. Uh,
Hmm.
I can't answer that. All I can tell you is I don't want to interrupt it, but yeah, it'll be greater when it's when there's 4 or 5 different winners in the pro ATV class. You know,
Hmm.
GNCC to the WXC right now. Three
Hmm.
rounds, 3 different winners. We
Right.
haven't seen that since I've been covering WXC. You haven't seen
Right. Right.
it's pretty neat stuff. Jessica Ilioff is still leading the points, and that's great for her uh,
Hmm.
as far as her quest for multi-time champions. But
Hmm.
look out,
Shout out to Jess as the local.
yeah, I mean she's your Ohio gal,
Yeah.
uh, but you got to look at Chloe Harper. Man,
Hmm.
that chick is fast. So is Hannah Hunter.
Hmm.
So it's going to be a great deal. We're talking about GNCC
Yeah.
instead of GNC, but it, you know. Um, What's your thoughts of the next round?
I think, like I said, we're getting back to a normal track that the style track that we're used to. We're unfortunately for me going to yet another sand race. So it's going to be a lot of prematurely worn out parts yet again. But we're going to a track that is laid out a little more. I mean, it's still a kind of a faster track, but it's laid out a lot more similar to what we're used to. So I think some of these riders that have had a couple bad rounds, hopefully they get to Echikani and they feel more at home, build some confidence, and do better. Because
Right.
if we can see 16 and obviously another one that we didn't talk about, but Cody Ford has not showed up to the first 2 rounds. He is battling some health things right now, so I hope that he gets everything figured out and gets better, so we can see him back on the racetrack.
Is he planning to come back when he's better?
As far as I know, he is. I mean, he's had a bike sitting at Daytona and Deckers now for him.
Okay, so
So, yeah, I know Mark built him a bike, but yeah, I hope he comes back and gives us another bike on the gate. But I think and I hope that once we get on this track, the riders get to ride on it. We're gonna have a lot more riders battling because Daytona was so tight as far as the qualifying times go. So hopefully we can get, 16, 17 riders that are all, a few hundredths off of each other.
right. I agree with that. Totally agree with that. I'm super excited to see where this all goes, to be totally honest with you. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the series, even the one on the West Coast here that we don't talk about much, the points are tight there.
Mm-hmm.
You have a guy that's been racing pro for 5 or 6 years. That's the points leader. Um, he's only been, I think, on top of the box once. and he's leading the points right now.
Yeah.
Been on the podium the 3 times out of the first 3 rounds.
Hmm.
Bo Barron is not your point leader. Travis Damon, the current champion, is not your points leader. Uh,
Hmm.
it's Logan Huff,
Yeah.
and, that's great for the West Coast to have a new guy to break it up. Your all your East Coast stuff, it's super competitive. They're mixing it up. It's great. There's been 3 rounds in the GNCC series,
Hmm.
and you have XC1, you have 2 winners. XC2, you have 2 winners. Um, WXC, you have three, and in Pro 4x4, you have two. So,
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, you got a couple people that have won twice, but for the most part, the order behind them is all mixed up and changed. And then you look
Hmm.
at your motocross. Joel's won everything.
Right.
He missed out on one qualifying in Daytona,
Right.
but everything else he's been fast qualifier. So it makes it a little tough, a little boring. But you know what we get to
Right.
talk about next time?
Everyone else?
WMX, Pro
Right.
Sport, and Pro Am,
Right. Right.
besides the Pro Class. So it's
Yeah,
gonna be,
exactly.
I think we're up for a good year. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Hmm.
Um, we dissect everything. You and I get into deep conversations and go
Hmm.
directions we probably shouldn't. At least we're having fun and we love the sport.